why Trump is definitely 100% going to be a one-term president, or maybe not by me. Who am I? Well, because I hate having credibility, I'm going to start by listing off all the wrong results I've predicted in past, a text, elections. See, in the run-up to the 2015 general election, I said that there was pretty much no way Ed Miliband wouldn't be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, albeit in a coalition with the SNP. My assumption was twofold. Firstly, that the left-wing Liberal Democrats would feel betrayed because of the whole tuition fees scandal, and therefore they would defect to Labour, the other left-wing party. Meanwhile, I assumed that the right-wing and centrist Liberal Democrats, if there are right-wing Liberal Democrats, would remain loyal to the party, since they'd be happy with the Lib Dem performance in the coalition. And at the same time as all of this, UKIP would rise up and split the right-wing vote. The exit polls predicted a hung parliament with the Tories getting 316 votes, but they actually managed to beat that and ended up becoming a majority government. Side note and fun fact, it's been over 30 years since an exit poll predicted a Tory majority, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. The party just keeps scraping on by like a cockroach. Anyway, the whole point is that despite all of my logic seeming to be pretty intuitive, the Tories did in fact win. Basically, almost everything I predicted didn't happen. Most of the disaffected Lib Dem voters seemed to just not vote at all, rather than switching allegiance to Labour. UKIP failed to get that many votes, possibly because of Cameron's promise of a referendum on the EU, more of that later, and without a split right-wing vote or a united left-wing vote, well, I was wrong. And then the next vote that matters was the vote on the EU. Told you we'd have more of that later. Now, this time my thoughts were pretty simple. The polls suggested something about 50-50, but most undecided people would probably decide at the last minute to vote for the status quo. That was my assumption. It was wrong. There isn't really much to say there, and I should say I wasn't absolutely confident about that, more cautiously optimistic. Anyway, so in the midst of this, there was the Democratic primary, and a lot of people wanted Bernie to win. Something I've noticed about American politics is that there is a peculiar conflation of what you think is going to happen with what you want to happen. Like, I did not think Bernie was going to win the primary, and because I didn't think that, everyone thought I was against him winning. I think it has something to do with the fact that Americans tend to be more optimistic than British people. So for an American, it's generally assumed that what you think is going to happen is what you want to happen. I'm not sure. It's just a trend I've noticed. But suffice to say, I didn't think Bernie was going to win. So I guess I get a point for that. There is one thing I will defend about the people who said Bernie could still win. A lot of people gave Bernie supporters flack for not counting the superdelegate votes.
You're making the same mistake. You're not subtracting the superdelegates.
Yeah, so can you explain why you do that again?
I don't like them.
Okay.
They're not democratic.
But the reason why many analysts didn't include the superdelegate votes is because 1, the superdelegate votes are not fixed and can change throughout the campaign. 2, it's entirely possible that the superdelegates would go with whomever the most popular candidate amongst the people is, since using superdelegates to override the votes of the actual party members might be considered unwise. Of course, none of this mattered because even without superdelegates, Bernie still lost. Okay, side note. Another thing about Bernie Bros. They're so sensitive. There was a Stephen Colbert video recently where Colbert made a pretty innocent joke.
Yes, like Dr. King, I have a dream where this diverse nation can come together and be led by an old white guy.
But the comment section is filled with salty Bernie bros who can't take a joke. I mean, I like Bernie Sanders, but his fans are definitely a bit sensitive. Anyway, so next was the 2016 election. Now, I thought Clinton was going to win, because that's what all the polls indicated. I didn't think Clinton was an especially good candidate, but I didn't think Trump was either. Now, at this point, it's become a bit of a meme to make fun of Trump supporters for not knowing the difference between a very low percentage and 0%. I mean, when you look at the actual predictions, it seems like the high for 538 was 88%, high for New York Times was 93%, and the high for the Huffington Post was 98%. While some of these percentages are very high, they all have something in common. None of them are 100%. But again, like I say, it's kind of a cheap shot to make fun of Trump supporters for not knowing the difference between a very low percentage and 0%. I remember one time when I was a little kid, I played Civilization, and in Civilization, it shows you the odds of victory before each battle. One time the odds were 98%, and I attacked and I lost, and I said to my dad, "How is that possible? I had a 98% chance of victory and I still lost. And my dad said, think about it this way. 98% means 49 out of 50. So if you fight 50 battles with a 98% chance of winning them, then statistically speaking, 1 time out of 50, you will lose. And from that point onwards, I understood how percentages worked. I just wish somebody would have taught Trump supporters how percentages work. And it's worth noting that Trump barely just won. I mean, I know in terms of the Electoral College, he got quite a few votes, but he lost the popular vote by a lot. And he was very lucky to win 2 states by very slim margins. He was even at one point projected to get fewer votes than Mitt Romney. If you want a good representation of just how lucky Trump was to win, you can change the election results by moving 4 counties. If Florida's panhandle were a bit shorter, and a tiny bit of Chicago were in Wisconsin, Clinton would have won. Now, I'm not suggesting from any of this that Clinton should have won or that Trump's victory was in some way illegitimate. I'm simply saying that the way Trump won is definitely reflective of the kind of victory you'd expect from somebody who had a very low chance of winning. Yes, the polls were wrong in a sense, but you can't really be wrong when you're talking about a percentage. If the polls say there's a 2% chance that Trump would win, you can't really say they were wrong to give it only a 2% chance. If I say there's an approximately 2% chance that you'll pull an ace of diamonds out of a deck of cards at random, and then you pull out an ace of diamonds, that doesn't mean my assessment of the odds were wrong. And in that sense, the polls can never really be wrong. And again, the 98% seems to be a fair bit higher than the other forecasts, which were around the mid-80s for Clinton. This leads up to a more general point, which is you don't really get to feel vindicated that I, as a liberal, have called so many of these recent elections incorrectly. I was wrong. I thought Clinton would win. When asked to put a number on it, I can't remember what I guessed exactly, but I actually guessed Clinton would win some states that were leaning red. But I was wrong. Very wrong. I do want to talk about the whole Bernie would have won thing. It kind of seems obvious to me that he would have won. Because the big thing that caused Trump to win the election was winning the Rust Belt states, which nobody thought were even in contention, because loads of rural working class voters picked Trump over Clinton. And you know what? Those voters also picked Bernie over Clinton. Clinton mostly won in states that were already very pro-Democrat, like California and New York, and she also won in states that were very pro-Republican and would never vote for a Democrat, such as in all the southern states. By contrast, Bernie won in Michigan and Wisconsin. Now, he didn't win Pennsylvania, but I'm guessing that's because the cities have a major advantage in a Pennsylvania Democratic primary, and they would vote Clinton. However, if you look at the counties map, you see that Sanders won many of the central Pennsylvanian counties that would be a big part of winning the state for Trump. So I can't help but think that Clinton won the primary but lost the election because the major areas that wanted her were either so pro-Democrat as to not make a difference or so pro-Republican as to not make a difference. Meanwhile, the states Bernie won were in the states that made a difference. I don't know, maybe somebody can explain that to me. I mean, the people of Wisconsin and Michigan had their second choice for Democratic candidate, and they were still very close elections. If you gave them their first choice of a Democratic candidate, surely winning those states would be a guarantee. I'm not really sure what states would supposedly flip to Trump if Bernie was the nominee. The only states I could imagine flipping would be the southern states, but they literally can't flip because they all went to Trump. So all Bernie would need to do is hope that his working class populism appeals to Pennsylvania more than Trump's working class populism, and boom, Bernie would have won. I honestly don't know if Bernie would have won, but I think it's definitely true he wouldn't have lost by as much, and that's definitely something. Anyway, so that's my opinion on polls, I guess, predictions and all that kind of stuff. And it's with all of this in mind that I have to say, I really don't see how Trump can possibly win in 2020. So here are my 3 reasons why Trump won't win in 2020. 1. Trump is unpopular. Look at these approval ratings. Those are bad approval ratings. All the other 2-term presidents had approval ratings in their 50s for most of their time in office. If you want to look at averages, Trump's approval rating is over 6 points below the second least popular president. It's also worth noting the 3 guys directly ahead of him in approval ratings were all only elected to 1 term. 2. Trump scarcely managed to beat the most unpopular Democratic candidate ever. You ever hear somebody say, "I'm sad Trump won, but happy Hillary lost"? You should have, because a lot of people say that. People view Hillary as uncharismatic, insincere, and corrupt. She got more votes than Trump. 3. The turnout is going to be really high. As I've already said, at one point Trump was projected to get fewer votes than Mitt Romney, the loser of last election. Although he did eventually manage to surpass that slightly, nonetheless, The only reason that he won is because so many Democrats were not enamored with Hillary and didn't vote. Trump didn't win because a lot of people voted for him. He won because a lot of people didn't vote for Hillary. The turnout for the 2014 midterm election was 75.7 million. The turnout for the 2018 midterm election was 111.7 million. That's a massive increase. And for the record, the turnout in the 2016 presidential election was 128.8 million, which was a very low turnout. In general, a high voter turnout favours the Democrats. As Tucker and Vedlitz put it in the American Political Science Review, the conventional model recognises the Democratic Party as the majority party of the population of potential voters. However, the sample of those who actually vote in a given election is not expected to be randomly selected from the population. Low turnout is expected to work to the advantage of Republicans because their supporters, while a minority of the population, are more likely to vote. Thus, low turnout elections provide greater potential for Republican majorities. High turnout is expected to provide the conditions necessary for Democrats to translate their majority status in the population of potential voters into a majority of those who vote in a given election. If that isn't clear, then I'll restate it. In general, for a variety of reasons, people who vote Republican are more likely to vote. Therefore, as the number of people voting gets higher, the greater the Democratic proportion of those new votes becomes. Now, in practice, there are complications as addressed in the article, but the general rule of thumb still holds, and the logic given for why high turnout tends to lead to Democratic victors seems to hold true. This is all important since the 2020 general election is fixing to have a phenomenally high turnout. 2018 saw a very high turnout in the midterms and a healthy Democratic victory, obviously hindered by the nature of the Senate. Since presidential elections always have higher turnouts than midterm elections, it seems almost certain that the 2020 presidential election will have a record turnout, and conventional political wisdom suggests that favours the Democrats. I know I said I only have 3, but I actually have 4 reasons. I think a lot of people who stayed home in 2016 because they thought it didn't matter have since realised that it does matter. This is the same reason why I suspect that Remain would win in a second EU referendum. I don't have any studies for this, but I know that I personally felt indifferent towards the 2016 presidential election due to not being especially fond of either candidate, right up until I found out Trump won, at which point I realised how awful that result actually is. With that in mind, I think hypothetically speaking, even if Hillary Clinton did run again, she'd actually win this time. Indeed, I think that if there were a second election held on November 9th, 2016, Hillary would have won. The minute that the results came in, many progressives suddenly realised the importance of keeping Trump out. Now, I don't think she should run again, but I think this time around people would pick her over Trump. I also think Bernie would win. In fact, I don't think there is a single Democrat running for president right now who wouldn't be more likely than not to win. There are only 2 ways that I think the Democrats would lose. The first is if the superdelegates do actually go against the popular vote. I am quite confident that this time the Bernie or bust folks wouldn't be too much of an issue if Bernie didn't win, since there are no candidates as unlikable as Hillary this election. However, if a progressive candidate has the nomination taken from them via superdelegates, that could be enough of an insult to cause such people to not vote. The second way would be if Democrats nominated Joe Biden. Joe Biden is really creepy. I hate Paul Joseph Watson, but I actually think his video about Joe Biden being creepy provides a really good summation of Biden's dodgy relationship with women and young girls. I think it's quite easily possible that credible accusations could be made against Biden, and even if no accusations are made, the evidence of him being creepy is already pretty damning. Now, I realise that Trump has done plenty of awful stuff to women. However, Trump has a very loyal fan base that will stand by him no matter what. Democrat voters are much more fickle and much less cult-like. It wouldn't take much to have them not voting. Now, I should say, I think it's still very probable that even if the superdelegates override the popular vote, or even if creepy Uncle Joe ends up running and winning, the Democrats would still win. The main point of this video is me saying that I am very confident Trump would not be a 2-term president. Now, I realise that I started this video by explaining how in the past I have made inaccurate predictions, so perhaps to many I might just appear like another liberal believing the polls and I'm going to be owned epic style in 2020. However, I think my reasons are pretty undisputable. Trump is unpopular. He just about managed to scrape by against a staggeringly unpopular candidate. There are going to be a huge number of people voting in 2020, and a lot of people have realised that not voting in 2016 was a huge mistake. And yes, Trump beat the odds before. But again, I must point out, it's not necessarily true that the odds were wrong. maybe we do just live in that reality where that 2% likely outcome actually happened. And if that's the case, can we expect it to happen twice? But all these people saying, ugh, Bernie 2020 equals Trump 2020 or whatever else, and acting as if the election hangs in the balance based on who becomes nominated as the Democratic candidate, I honestly have to reiterate, I don't think there's a single contender who wouldn't have a very good chance of beating Trump, except Biden, who isn't running, and I hope he doesn't. Anyway, so what did you think? Was that a good video? Was it a terrible video? Let me know with the thumbs up or thumbs down button. Subscribe for more content and comment below to let me know your thoughts. And I have to now give credit to my first ever Patreon backer. Hannah Taylor saw the content I was producing and decided it was worth the $1 donation I'm asking for, $12 a year. Now, I'm actually over 1% of my way towards this goal. So I do get a lot of people asking me to cover various topics, and for that reason I'm thinking of adding an extra tier of $2 or $3, which would basically allow people to do, in some way, influence what topics I cover. That might be in the form of some kind of poll, or I could just promise that whatever you suggest I'll do. And regarding the $75 goal, basically once I hit that goal, I'm going to do this as my part-time job, or rather I'm going to go part-time on my job. And my plan basically is to do 50% of what I plan on doing if I'm ever able to do YouTube full-time. So what I plan on doing when I can do YouTube full-time is reading 200 pages a day and basically bringing that research into my video. So to sort of test the waters on that, when I hit that $75 mark, I'm going to go part-time, which I have the liberty of being able to do, and sort of flex my academic muscles a bit more and hopefully provide videos that everybody will enjoy more. So yeah, if you're watching this and you've got $1, I would love to read your name out at the end of my videos. Thanks again to Hannah Taylor. Goodbye, everyone. God, I really hated recording that. I honestly, I don't know if I've said this in a recording yet, but it's genuinely true. If the number one job I hate is recording. And honestly, like, part of me almost would be happy to have somebody else record these videos. Like, I write the scripts, I do the research, I do the editing, everything else. Just have another person come in and read it, because I fucking hate reading it. I hate the sound of my voice. You know that old Sweatshirt line? Don't press record, I hate my fucking voice. That's honestly, I really hate the sound of my own voice. And I hate recording, yeah. Jesus. Oh, God.
Do it!